There's a new indie found footage horror that's available right now on demand. It's called Chad Gets the Axe. And at first glance, it reminded me a ton of the brilliantly executed comedy horror Deadstream. This does have some differences to it though. But should you be watching? Four social media influencers live stream their trip to Devil's Manor, the former home of a satanic cult. Things don't go well, and as the violence ramps up, so do the views. So I was really worried that this was just going to be a cheap ripoff of 2022's phenomenal horror comedy from Vanessa and Joseph Winter called Deadstream. Now, I also got some Tucker vs. Dale vibes from the trailer, and while this does share some huge similarities to Deadstream, thankfully, the movie takes its own path and does something different, all while staying within the same vein. Now, we've got these social streamers who travel to explore a haunted house where supposedly satanic sacrifices had been committed at. First off, these characters, they're pretty repugnant. They're grating, rude, hyper self-fixated, and just generally cringy people. And we know they're doing this stunt purely for the view count. And that's a great premise. I mean, it makes sense within today's zeitgeist, and is something that the majority of us can relate to on some level. And not that we're all streamers or influencers, but that we're at least aware these people exist to complete these sorts of self-challenges. Now, because I was not digging any of the characters, I was really worried that I wouldn't care in the slightest if they were picked off. And the setup, it's ripe for this. We learned very quickly that in addition to doing these crazy stunts, the four streamers and their other streaming friends, they like to pull pranks on each other. So immediately a notion that not everything we watch could be real is established, making for a very skeptical viewing experience. Even the commenters in the live stream, they're skeptics too. And the roasting that goes on within the comments is at times horrific, but also it's spot on, especially when the streamers are just being D-bags. Now, funny enough though, as the story progresses along, I was being sucked into the tension and the suspense in a huge way. And this is where the movie really differs from Deadstream. While Deadstream is a horror comedy, this one isn't really funny at all. I mean, the streamers try to be funny, but they're just mostly cringy. This one is downright creepy and eerie. This dives headlong into a horror thriller that put me on the edge of my seat. And for as much as I disliked the characters, I began to slightly sympathize with them. Meaning I was no longer wishing for bad things to happen to them. I mean, I wasn't rooting for them, but I wasn't rooting against them either. Now, there's an excellent use of limited light and shadows. The streamers, they all have their phones and a flashlight, but these don't illuminate much, especially when they're inside this deserted house that has barely any natural light coming in. The field of vision is narrow and it's small, which is definitely played up to the story's advantage, so things can creep in the background. But we can never be sure if it's just a trick of the shadows from the phone or the flashlight, or if the light did actually catch something lurking ready to take a streamer out. Now, the pace of the movie is quick. I mean, it's only 83 minutes. But once the thrills kick in, the narrative steps on the gas and it beelines it straight to the terror and the dread. We watched this in utter darkness, and it was awesome because just like the characters, we were plunged into blackness, especially when a flashlight would be dropped or the lights would just not be shining on the characters. Now, there's a huge element also of voyeurism within the plot. Not only are we as the audience peering into these people's lives and watching their every move, there are elements to some of the chaos that occurs that also draw in the idea of being watched. It's creepy and it's executed well, augmented by the frequent screams of the streamers. Now, there are a few moments that feel a little out of place at first, but then they fit within the narrative nicely. Chad, one of the streamers, tries to contact a relative for some assistance. Their conversation, it is cringy, but also wildly biting as one self-absorbed individual speaks with another who's just as narcissistic. There's a very dark humor that's at play, and it just works to reinforce the actions and the behaviors that we already find reprehensible in the streamers. So to have it reflected back on them is a wonderful irony. There's another sequence also that revisits that same idea, but in a different way, and it's equally effective. I mean, it's awkward and it's maddening, but very fitting. Now, I was surprised at how much fun I ended up having with this. There's not much development at all on any of the characters. Even the supposed villains aren't delved into with much detail. But the only things we need to know are conveyed clearly, and they work exceptionally well to create a foreboding atmosphere that starts off with some dread and ends with chilling imagery and actions. I mean, it's like Dr. Ian Malcolm said, ooh, that's how it always starts. Then later, there's running and screaming. Chad Gets the Axe is a fun and freaky horror adventure with an unanticipatedly enjoyable cast. Grab your friends and settle in for a quick and scary stream. There's no sex or nudity, a ton of profanity, and a lot of violence. I give hashtag Chad Gets the Axe 3.5 out of 5 couches. So what's a movie that surprised you? Something you thought was going to be crap, but turned out to be fun? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.